seats on this stuff. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, my name is Chatmon Dorsey, JCPS Diversity, Equity, and Poverty. Appreciate you all coming out, especially on a lovely night and the biggest recovery day of the year for us is Louisville business. And so I know you all are definitely committed to the cause. The gentleman we have with us this evening is Mr. Chris Chatmon. Mr. Chatmon is actually, it's not his first time here in Louisville. He has been participating in the Campaign for Black Male Achievement annual event for those who work for African American males throughout the country called Rumble Young Man Rumble at the Ali Center. And that's where I first met Chris, and he's back with us this week. How you doing? He's actually visited 3 schools today, did a tremendous job. The students loved him. We went to Shawnee, he went to was it Wagner, Moore, and the very well received from the young man. He is the Deputy Chief of Equity at Oakland Public School System. And he does phenomenal work inside the district, outside the district. And I'm gonna let him do his thing, but I also want him to shine a little light because Oakland has been through a lot of turnover and transition, kind of like what we have experienced here at JCPS. So he's doing all of this in the midst of all that turnover. So can't say enough about him, and he's been great too. I learned so much just driving him around today. So with no further ado, Mr. Chris Chatmon.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Brother Delquan. I want to thank the folks that made it possible for me to be here, really in service of you all and what you all are trying to do in the city of Louisville, I got it right?
That's better than the first one.
There we go. And just honored. I'm a little tired, but I'm going to feed off your energy as well. And so the fact that you chose to be here today with me in community, one, I don't take that for granted. I really am honored and humbled that you chose to spend time and take a moment in your time to listen and learn about the work we're doing in Oakland Unified School District. And so I'm going to talk a little bit, that's the bulk of my presentation. So I'll talk about that, but I do believe really in the power of story, the power of story in the spirit of setting frame, the power of story in building relationships, the power of story really to dismantle inequity. I think a lot of times inequity, the conditions of inequity are just based out of our own ignorance of each other. And so I ask you to be exactly who you are, as I will be, not with judgment, but with love and consideration. So I'm going to just start quickly with my story in the spirit of who I am and why is this cat coming all the way from Oakland, leaving his 3 sons and wife and work to just spend a little moment where I can be in community with you. And first and foremost, at the core, I am really, actually this mantra we use in Ubuntu is I am because we are because I am, may the circle be unbroken. And as a child who was adopted, really I'm the collective genius and the collective culmination of so many brothers and sisters, men, women, black, white, Latino, Chicano, Asian, Pacific Islander, indigenous. I am the culmination of no one that ever allowed me to give up. And so from kindergarten to 8th grade, had a very negative experience in public schools. Really in elementary school, I associated school with just getting hit by my teachers. I was a really spirited young brother. And that time, maybe if they were doing IEPs, I didn't get an IEP. They were doing 504s and other kind of formal classifications of, what's going on with this kid. I didn't get that. What I got was assume the position at the table, get the paddle at the back of the door, and they would I would just get hit all the time. In 3rd grade, Miss Keogh didn't know how to deal with my spirited energy, so she put my desk in the coat closet. And so as everyone was sitting in their little rows, my desk would be at the door in the back, the door was open, and if I was talking or fidgeting, she would just go close the door and I would sit there. And so, it wasn't really a positive experience. Middle school, another crazy situation when your grandparents are now, I'm actually amongst my peers and some of y'all, when you used to walk 5 to 10 miles to school, I had to walk 5 to 10 miles to school. Why? Because I got banned from public school busing. They literally had a picture of me on the public school buses that said, do not let this child on your bus. And then I get to high school and already my rep had already been established. And my guidance counselor and the folks who were supposed to guide me were like, dude, why are you here? You're in the wrong school. You should be at Baden High School, the continuation high school. But what saved me really was, then it was the boys club, the Boys and Girls Club. It was Oakland Park and Rec. It was South City Park and Rec. It was really a lot, it was youth development. Folk that didn't define me by my grades, or didn't define me by my squiggly wiggliness. They really defined me by, I was just a young kid and full of potential and energy. And so right around junior year in high school, what became clear to me was I wanted to be a teacher. And I wanted to make sure that I set up the systems and the structure and the culture and knew everybody in my class. Why? So when kids came into my classroom, they would have a transformational experience and they wouldn't have to go through what I went through. And so I've been on this journey, y'all. I'm the Deputy Chief of Equity, but at heart, I am the kindergarten, 8th grade PE teacher that I trained to do. I am the 9th through 12th grade modern world history and her story teacher that technically I was trained to do. And I brought that into my principal years as well. I have an AP in our midst and a principal, and I appreciate any and all of you who've had the audacity actually every day to serve, because I know it's not easy. Because I remember me as a kid, and I also remember me as a teacher, K-8 in high school. And so I'm gonna do a little teaching today. Might slip in a little preaching, and don't, I'm not a preacher, but in the spirit of passion and purpose. This is passion and purpose work, so on some level I'm going to be talking to your head and your heart, and hopefully you'll be talking to me as well. Not in the spirit of talking at, but just kind of sharing my story and what we're doing. But it is important to know that this work is very personal to me. And so I'm going to share what we're doing. It may be helpful for me though, because this is a dense deck. I just been on this crazy tour. I was in Chicago last week, and then went from Chicago to Phoenix, and now I'm here, which is a blessing. But this presentation I'm going to share with you all is the presentation I did at Castle in Chicago. And basically Castle is this massive convening of districts across the country that focus on social emotional learning, values education, character development. It's evolved over the years. So I didn't have enough time to change the deck specific for this. So some of it, it'll be light touch, some of it I'm going to go deeper. But if I know who you are in the room, I can know maybe from an AP standpoint, or just where you're at, a principal standpoint, or a classroom, or if it's more elementary, I can maybe lean in certain things, and you can lean in with me, just in the spirit of contextualizing my journey and information with who you are and maybe why you're here. So just real quick, maybe name and who you are, not your philosophy on life, please humbly, but just kind of name and role, just so I can get a sense of when I present how I kind of connect to you. Cool? So we'll start right here.
My name is Shalina, and I'm not an educator.
Oh, there we go. Hey, that's important. So I appreciate you here, concerned citizen.
Delaware, I mean, retired engineer. Engineers have to keep learning if they're going to be on the edge.
Right on. I appreciate that.
Joanna Sells, I'm an elementary AP.
Right on. Thank you.
Courtney Grace, elementary assistant principal.
Right on.
Wes, I'm in school for middle secondary education.
That's what's up. What school?
U of L.
All right. Right on time.
Joseph Holland, senior at U of L.
All right. Right on.
Stacy Irvin, assistant principal at Whitney Young.
Right on. Excellent.
April Brooks, assistant principal at J-Town High.
Excellent. Right on.
Dorico Irvin, assistant principal at Fairdale High School.
All right. Excellent.
Carla Robinson, I'm the youth and education coordinator here at the Urban League.
All right.
Judy Lippman, and I'm a community volunteer.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Jason Stinson, I'm assistant principal here at the school.
All right. Right on. Thank you. And that is high school. Did you? Awesome. Right, just in the back real quick, if we can just, in the spirit of everybody in the room, my brother in the back.
John Marshall, Chief Equity Officer.
There we go. Right on, man.
You doing all right?
It's good to see you, brother. Thank you for your leadership and light. What's this
Delma
grade?
Logan, support staff at Dr. Marshall's department.
Right on. And Del Quan? Right on. I just want to say I was actually, our film crew.
Yeah, Abdul Sharif, I'm with JCPS.
Right on. Thank you. I was honored a few years ago, actually, in Washington, D.C., to meet Brother Marshall. He was honored Education Week leader to learn from. So just, man, he represented this city, this community beautifully, and inspired and motivated me. So I'm glad we stayed connected. Thank you for the opportunity to come to your community and share. So y'all ready to get down? All right, cool. So it might be, I don't know if we can we maybe dim or darken the light here just in the spirit of seeing? Because I am going to use this as kind of the primary guide. And I'll get you to post it. There you go. All right, so I'm gonna open with this video. And this will give you context around what we're doing here in Oakland.
I was just walking down my neighborhood like I do every day. Someone walked up to me, asked me what gang am I from. But as I'm looking at him, I see him reaching for something. I immediately put my hands up. I'm not trying to die. So he points it at me. He looks at me, he puts it away, and he keeps walking. I think I dodged a bullet. My days are not promised, so that could have been the end of my life right there. From 6th grade to 8th, I changed a lot. Like my transformation has been great. My average GPA in 6th grade was a 2.8. Now it's a 3.8, and now I'm a student council. If I didn't have an MVP, I didn't have that. I feel like that I'm a threat, basically. Like I'm not gonna be handling my business. I'm not gonna be speaking. It changed because they finally know who I really am. They don't see me as a black male.
Teaches you about being in boyhood to manhood, which is almost the greatest level. They're actually teaching us being a king and teaching you not to get caught up in the media and the matrix. When I became a biologist in chemistry sciences, and I went to cure cancer, and maybe after that do cure smallness.
Who are you? I'm a king, and you? A kingmaker, the AAMA way, live in the bay. Welcome to my world, come see what's good. It's deeper than the class, it's really a brotherhood. Who are you? I'm a king, and you? A kingmaker, the AAMA way, live in the bay. Welcome to my world, come see what's good. It's deeper than the class, it's really a brotherhood. Come and take a seat. It's a class where the past of the kingdom makers meet. At the end of the day, face the let's breathe. Let the noise out there motivate to move my feet like go get 'em. Met a couple brothers we call chillin'. Talk about the hit they gon' give us this old system. We in here ain't no victim. How you gonna battle and all me alone? Gotta try for the family so I'm always at home. And when we separated, all the business is shown. And if you hear any noises in the beat, boys like what hood we rap? Man, what hood we rap? Man, fuck it up for yourself. Who are you? I'm a king, and you? A kingmaker, the AAMA way, live in the bay. Welcome to my world, come see what's good. It's deeper than the class, it's really a brotherhood. A brotherhood.
Hey, give it up for the AAMA sizzle reel. One of the things that, and we'll talk a little bit about the power of narrative change, and even this, y'all getting the sense of hearing from my story. We're really big about telling our story. Would encourage you, and actually would love to hear. I'm gonna probably do about 40 minutes of kind of sharing information, and then we can just have a dialogue, if that's cool with the protocol and process. We could break it down, but there's a lot I want to get through, and then we can maybe do some sharing and learning. But we're real big on sharing videos, and we have podcasts, we have the Kingmakers of Oakland, SoundCloud, we got music, we got a whole lot of stuff to really shift the narrative. One, around how we talk about black boys. Two, around just the sounds that we hear and the things that we see around black children in the ecosystem that we call the school district and broader within the city of Oakland. And it's a real strategic intention around that, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But if you're interested in watching the 5 mini documentaries, go to kingmakersofoakland.org. It's all free. There's a curriculum that goes with it. And actually we'll be soon, bless you, adding to that website so you can buy some of the nice things that you all see. So the framing today really is around, and I was telling one of the gentlemen here, we refer to, bless you, we refer to all of our students as kings. and we'll talk a little bit about why do we refer to our students as kings. And so it's Kingmakers of Oakland, treating the fish in the toxic ecosystem. So the metaphor is in the ecosystem, and you'll see a schematic that we use. The conditions that we've created for black children in this country, not just Oakland, are very toxic. And we're gonna unfold some of that from a historical standpoint, a system instructional standpoint, a pedagogical standpoint. But it is important to know we are not into the work that we're doing. It's not about fixing black boys. Black boys are brilliant, beautiful, extraordinary, but the conditions we've created are very toxic. So much in the way, for those of us who have children, we send our children to go get shots, right? We inoculate them for some of the diseases that are out there so they can do what they need to do. Our metaphor in this ecosystem is what we have to offer as our Kingmakers theory of action and the classes that we have really is the inoculation while we do the heaviest lift, and that's addressing the systemic, the structural, the conditions that take, unfortunately, decades to dismantle. But we'll talk a little bit about that. But I just want folks to understand kind of how I'll be talking about that here today. And again, kind of each section could be a whole week on. In particular, this first section, which is how do we get here, right? And so the toxicity that we talk about, well, the intro, I'll get into that. I'm gonna skip on the intro just because I have so much rich data, and I'm probably not gonna see you again. And you guys are in community, but I would encourage you, everything that I'm teeing up, like I believe this, we have all that we need to address the issues in front of us. Really, it's a matter of will and organization. And so I'm here with you today because I have the will to be in community, to share, that we can figure this out. But you can't figure it out if you don't know each other. You can't figure it out if you don't take time to get to know your assets and your skills. Once you know that, then you can organize in a way to address those issues. And so, although I would normally do get to know you, I'm gonna pass on that, just in the spirit you're here to hear me talk and get some information. So we all good with that? All right, beautiful, right. All right, so these are just some guiding questions. And again, I was using this from a social emotional learning, but these are some amazing brothers. That's Brandon. He played ball at Stanford, but he's now the CEO of this project called Hidden Genius Project. And I say that to say that as you acknowledge you're an engineer, we're doing a lot of work around STEM. Don't mean that we have to do it, but I connect our students and folks that are interested with outside agencies that are doing amazing work around STEM. And he's an extraordinary brother. He leads Hidden Genius Project. The brother in the middle is my replacement. I'm the founder of the founding executive director, kind of the architect of African American Male Achievement, when I pivoted to become now the deputy chief of equity. And we should always be thinking about legacy, right? And this is the thing we're always teaching. Who's gonna replace you in your family? You know what I'm saying? Who's gonna replace you? That one that's always cooking Sunday dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. You should be grooming somebody so when you go, they can do that. The same is true around leadership, around culture and community. For me, I knew African American Male Achievement couldn't live and die with me. I was grooming. Who's the next person that's gonna replace me? That brother right there is a life force. He's my brother. My sons call him uncle to let you know how close we are. But he's a journeyed, tenured educator in Oakland. He's now the director of African American Male Achievement. You'll notice, did everybody get a calendar? Yeah. So those the dashikis on that calendar, we in all love to folks who get their dashikis from Kmart or wherever else. This brother has a connect in Nigeria, in a particular region, and so we, just as much as our kings, I have a student leadership council. It's my youth board. We have our European power suits, so I get them suited and booted. We also have our African power suits, and those dashikis are handmade from a village in Nigeria. And Brother Dean is my conduit to that. So I just want to acknowledge these brothers, because again, I am because of so many other brothers. But I would say this, in times of strife, when you're talking about state receivership, always remind yourself what brings you joy, right? Like even this morning, man, I was so tired, came from Chicago, then to Phoenix. I didn't know my itinerary said you were going to visit 3 schools, and that's on me, it's all love. But I got that call, my brother was like, I'm gonna pick you up in 30 minutes, what did I do?
You came to Louisville, not Phoenix.
I'm sorry, that's right. When I came to, it's such a blur, when I came to Louisville, all that to say, it shows how tired I was. When I woke up, I thought I had a little bit more time, but it was all good. I was honored to actually be able to put on my clothes and go visit Kings and share a story. And it was dope, man. Beautiful Kings, awesome. And one of the classes actually was the lunchtime suspension class for the Kings who got, you know, the tardy sweeps. And so I could have been like, oh, you know, they don't know me, I don't know them. But that 30 minutes, I put my heart and soul into it. And because they put in what they received, they really had a good time. But what brings you joy in your work? For me, I love teaching. I love talking about my truth. I love building with people. That's really important, y'all. And I'll talk a little bit about this later in terms of how community things that we do. We do these man-up conferences. I come to Louisville every year for the big conference, the Muhammad Ali Center. I know we stand tall because we stand on the shoulders of kings like Muhammad Ali. And one of the blessings of Muhammad Ali, his story is he attributes his greatness to a number of different people. One, Louisville. Two is Chatmon and his doctor and his trainer. And so we don't make it anywhere by ourselves. But one of the things that we do are our man-up conferences. I'm gonna quiz some of you guys later because I got some nice little bags up front up here. But how do you model the transformation you seek in others? How don't you? These are just guiding questions, y'all. You know, it's good to think about. This is actually the University of Austin, Texas. I brought a group of kings we got to present at the University of Texas. Another key question, what is feeling most hopeful for you about your work? This is the same group of, different group of kings, but part of my student leadership council. We got invited to present at the New Orleans School Board Parish School Board meeting when they were talking and grappling around, man, what do we do differently to support black boys in our school district? So we flew all the way out there, suited and booted, and did a 45-minute presentation. It wasn't me talking, it was all these kings talking as well. Presenting at that trip. But what helps you stay committed to your work and sustains you through the hardest parts? Community. This is part of my student leadership council. What does it look like for you to be an ally across differences? For whom are you an ally? That's important to know. Are you a friend or are you a foe? All right, so brief description of the day, and I'm gonna see if this, oops. There's no laser. Oh, it's all low. So basically, I'm going to be talking about kingmakers. I'm going to be talking about treating the fish in the toxic ecosystem. These are some of my kings. This is my son. I'm going to play a song from him a little bit later. He started at AMA, Man of Development, in 8th grade. We're always building community. I knew this king in 4th grade when I was his t-ball coach. He's now 2nd year in college. Kunda up top, just got accepted to Morehouse. Fi is an amazing young man. Royal, his two older brothers got, he and his younger brother went one way in life. His two older brothers, which I wish we had earlier, are now in the juvenile justice system involved home in Oakland. And it's a young brother, Connor, is an awesome young man. Really important in the spirit of engaging, encouraging, empowering black males, get to know them. I'm going to give you a heavy data set, and I actually asked this at one of our schools today, and it was very similar to how many of our young black men, many of our kings are experiencing teachers. We get caught up, and this is kind of matrix thinking, and I've talked about the powers of systemic oppression and structural racism. We don't know. Sometimes we see some children with very light melanin or no melanin. We'll greet them, hey, how are you doing? You look great today. And we see a brother, hey, how are you? And we don't greet them. Be aware of we all have biases, but it's very important, man, greeting your kings, knowing their names, knowing that they're loved, knowing where they come from. They want to be seen, like every child. But sometimes we're not aware of that, and we see some while others we don't see. Or what we see is negative and skewed, and we don't see that of the others. So I say that to say, whenever I see a young king, I'm walking up, greeting them, and trying to engage, and just the power of that is huge. So I just wanted to share a few of the young kings I'm talking to. So these are the topics that we'll spend some time on: disrupting patterns of institutional racism. And that I really want to lift up, because the system and the structure really was not created overnight. And it really, these racialized outcomes are by design. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Secondly, changing the narrative about black boys from the deficit to the asset. Very, very important. The importance and necessity of infusing and embedding African-centered, academically rigorous coursework with culturally responsive SEL. Probably our heaviest lift in the United States around accelerating academic performance for black boys, and this is true for all children, is evolving out of a Eurocentric content curriculum structure and evolving to a more global curriculum that really lifts up the cultural legacy of not just black children, but black children, brown children, Asian Pacific Islander children, indigenous children. And you can't just get that in your February Black History Month or your 10th grade ethnic studies course. We really have to think if we want to revolutionize public school education, we have to change the narrative and lift up the narrative of people of color. And if we're preparing our children for a global economy, all children, black, white, API or otherwise, need to know the legacy and the contributions on this total planet through math, language arts, science, and history. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. This is a big one, recruitment and retention strategies for African American males. I'll talk about how our retention rate for African American male teachers is 92%, and we've increased the number of black male teachers in our district by 25%. I'll share a little bit about that. And then power and practicality of parent and community engagement, right? We can't do this in isolation of our community. That's why I appreciate that we have community here. That's what it's all about, because it really takes a village. So those are the topics we're going to be talking about. And I can go a little less. I'm gonna go, I can go deeper in some and less in other areas based on where you all want to take it. All right, so the first one, which I have a whole activity that I would normally do, but today is more kind of top-down information dissemination. Disrupting patterns of institutional racism. All right, so, and I know this is a hard picture to see. Does everyone know who this sister is right here, this educator? Say it loud. Yes, and what historically, is anyone comfortable kind of talking about why she's such an what she was doing during that time period and why it's so extraordinary? Yes, ma'am.
She was educating black children, especially girls, at the time when we could not be educated. Further on, she created an HBCU that is dope as hell. Can I say hell? Dope as hell. So the sister actually did come through for women at a time where we were still being secondary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, that period of Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And I say that to say that sometimes we talk about and we get so caught up and we don't have enough resource or we're gonna go into state receivership. There's all this stuff coming on. But imagine leading at the time that she was leading. The audacity of which she spoke truth to power. Gives me permission to believe that what I have to deal with is really nothing, right? So knowing our history and her story is really important because we know that our elders, our forefathers, and our foremothers dealt with far more with far less. And so I say this to some of our educators in the room and we're like, I've gone through 3 mid-year budget cuts in the last 365 days, 5 superintendents in 8 years. That is humbling for anybody, and you, for my teacher folk, you know how stressful and changing that is. But I say this to say, we have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power towards good ends. If we have the courage and tenacity of our forebears who stood firm like a rock against the lash of slavery, we shall find a way to do for our day what they did for theirs. Y'all with me? Y'all with me? All right, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So we're gonna talk a little history real quick. All right, so normally I would have these history facts and you all would do a little kind of mingle and share some of these historical facts. And so we're not gonna do that. I'm just gonna kind of hit on some key historical facts that created the conditions on one, given when people like think about, well, how do we get to these, how do we get to this system here in 2018? And it's it's urban, suburban, and rural. Ain't nobody in this country has figured out how to educate children who've come from colonized communities. Y'all with me? Children who came here under some extraordinary conditions. That's kind of been the struggle. So it's important to deconstruct it and come up with strategies. You have to understand the historical context. So I just want to share a couple of points in time. In this first slide, 1830s, most southern states have laws forbidding teaching people enslaved to read. Even so, around 5% become literate. Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers, 1779, Thomas Jefferson proposes a 2-track educational system with different tracks for, in his words, the laboring and the learned. Scholarships would allow a select few of the laboring class to advance by raking a few geniuses from the rubbish. So we're getting a historical context of what was the foundation, why public school was created. Y'all with me? Who was it created for and who it wasn't necessarily created. Y'all with me? And again, I can't go into the deep, it's just at a very high level. Now I know none of us can see that, not even me. But a couple other ones, so we went from the 1700s, I'm just gonna pick 1851, and this is just random. State of Massachusetts passes first its compulsory education law. The goal is to make sure that children of poor and immigrants get civilized and learn obedience and restraint so they make good workers and don't contribute to social upheaval. That's 1851. Let's jump to 1872. 1872, Harriet Ward attempts to enroll her daughter, Mary Frances, in an all-white school in San Francisco. When the principal refused to admit her, Ward led the suit. Ward v. Flood, 1873. It was California's first case challenging educational segregation. However, the California Supreme Court, in its ruling, foreshadowed the logic of the U.S. Supreme Court, Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, in using the principle separate but equal. Y'all with me in terms of where we're going?
Yeah.
Set in historical context of these conditions, these systems and structures did not happen overnight. So we shouldn't be surprised when we do what we do with well-intention that the outcomes are racialized. If we understand it is by design, is where we're going. And again, we would typically have much more dialogue and sharing, but I'm just kind of going through. 1946, Mendez v. Westminster, League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC. Lawyers challenged school segregation in California, led by Mexican-American parents in Orange County. NAACP lawyers followed case closely and modeled the strategy in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. 1968, African-American parents and white teachers clashed in the Ocean Hill-Brownsville area of New York City over the issue of community control of the schools. Teachers go on strike, and community organizes freedom schools while the public schools are closed. Let's go to 1994, Prop 187 passes in California, making it legal for children of undocumented immigrants to attend public school. Federal courts hold Proposition 187 unconstitutional, but anti-immigrant feelings spread across the country. The last one I'll read, because this one just got turned over for folks who are following ethnic studies movement. In 2011, the Arizona State Legislature passes bill that effectively bans the ethnic studies program in Tucson's largest school district. The new law prohibits any curriculum that promote the overthrow of the United States government, promote resentment toward a race or a class of people, are designed primarily for pupils of a particular ethnic group, for advocate ethnic solidarity instead of treatment of pupils as individuals. Under this law, the state can withhold up to 10% of a district's funding for a violation, about $15 million per year in the case of Tucson schools. This was reversed very recently. We're now ethnic studies, and Carlos Acosta, amazing brother, doing work for Latino, Chicano, indigenous brothers and sisters. He and a cadre of different leaders got the state to rescind that, so they now are teaching ethnic studies across the state. But recently in 2015, former Supreme Court Justice made this statement. So again, this is the highest court in our country. There are those who contend that it does not benefit African Americans to get into the University of Texas, where they do not do well, as opposed to have them go to a less advanced school, a slower track school where they do well. Most of the black scientists in this country don't come from schools like the University of Texas. They come from lesser schools where they don't feel that they are being pushed ahead in classes that are too fast for them. So again, he has a very skewed sense of what students need and have access to. So what is the residual effect of this history? Oppression. Any system produces what it was designed to produce. So when we talk about we have departments of equity, what we need to understand, in order to dismantle inequity, you can't just do it by fixing children. We really have to think of a system, a structure, a culture that creates a condition of which that normalizes success for all children. No one has figured this out. So I just want to acknowledge that. That's why it is important for us to be in right relationships so we can learn and grow, so we can reimagine systems of liberation versus systems of oppression. Some assumptions, though, about systemic oppression. One, oppression is the systematic mistreatment of a group of people. Hurts us all, no matter where we are in the social order. Oppression is a system built into our daily life, beyond individual acts. Oppression impacts teaching, learning, and leading. And lastly, we all need to heal from the effects of oppression. So one of the other challenges that I'm seeing in particular around the work, equity work, and I lost this battle, right? So not only was I the architect, and again, it's a long journey. I was the architect of AMA, right? It started in 2010, and now we've grown. But when I first pitched the Office of Equity, I actually framed it to the board and the community as the Office of Racial Equity and Healing. But as I went through a year of community engagement and meeting with everybody, and it came to the first read at the board meeting, the board made me drop race, and they made me drop healing. And actually, the initial equity policy proposed got generalized dramatically, which just means it's going to slow the time to get to where we're at. But I say this to say, one of the reasons why we can't stay in these conversations is because we don't have healing frame, right? If we begin to acknowledge the oppression and what we feel, if you're a parent, I mean, just for those of us who are parents, and when our sons come home from experiencing microaggressions and learning a curriculum, my 8th grade son in September said, "Dad, check this out." And you know what his homework assignment was? In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We both started laughing, but we were like, damn, in 2017, this was in September, that we're still teaching that. Crazy. But I say to say, we can't get through those real difficult conversations because we don't have a healing frame. And so the RJ practices, sitting in circle, the reason why we need to share story, we can get through that pain when I know you and I love you and you know me. And those stories, black, white, or otherwise, we can get through that if we have a vested interest in one another. And so I say this to say, that to me is real deep. If we're really going to do this work, we really have to have a healing frame to get us through the work. So I offer you today, question.
Yeah. Don't you all have the racial equity policy though?
We have an equity policy.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It's slow. Big ships make very slow turns. And so, and just a quick one, and maybe you'll appreciate this. So although it is an equity policy, and there's a number of things in it, the rubber to the road of any equity policy are what they call the administrative regulations. So what I was able to do was we got the policy, but then through the policy I was able to create the Office of Equity and really elevate this idea of targeted universalism. So it really gave, it substantiated African American male achievement, but then we were able to launch African American female excellence. So our girls who are under attack, on multiple levels, not just black girls, that's a yes for sure, but other girls in the spirit of living in a male-dominated, sexist, misogynistic society, right? And so I say to say that our girls needed safe spaces, our women needed safe spaces to talk, and we as men need to be quiet and acknowledge our sexism and be able to listen and understand and be advised. We created an office for our girls and women. We also created a department of Latina student achievement and a department of Asian Pacific Islander student achievement. That was the workaround, which then that group has been my action group doing action research to then calibrate with the system and community, but to write the action steps, which we just did a first read 2 weeks ago at a board meeting. But this is the beautiful struggle. And so what I'm trying to do now is get everyone, when we're looking at the work of addressing systemic oppression and structural racism, is everyone needs to have their bifocals, right? And in their bifocals, we all need to be able to see oppression, and we need to be able to see racial equity. You all with me? And so the offering in some of the historical context, and where I'm going to go to next, is I want everybody just to play with me. Put on your bifocals right now. Your oppression, your systemic oppression bifocals, and your racial equity bifocals. These are important. Why? In particular, for those of us in our ecosystem, it allows you to see things maybe in ways that you didn't see. It's like, ooh, wow. that's a structural issue. Oh, wow, that's a microaggression. Oh, wow, these are some things that I hadn't thought about. So it's just another way to kind of look at the work a little bit differently. And so this is how some of the things that we're doing in Oakland to build, and again, we're all on our journey. Some of us can get it immediately, and some of us are gonna need some time, right? Based on our own history and our own orientation. So what I'm even sharing with you, some of you may be, oh, excellent, and some of you may be, this dude is crazy, like I'm not feeling you. That's okay though, and I'm all right with that, but this is important at some point that we just stay in dialogue. So the frame is having these bifocals so we can begin to see the problem and then talk about the problems. So part of now we all have our bifocals on, and this is, okay, you can kind of see it. We kind of deconstruct this on, and this is why we're moving away from professional development models to more individual, interpersonal, structural, and systemic transformation, right? If we're gonna change the system, you can't PD. You can't say, okay, I'm gonna take the 3-hour culturally responsive pedagogy training, and I check that box, and now I do culturally responsive. No, culture is ever evolving. It's a constant, and so you have to sign up for maybe the 3 lifetime training, and that's all ongoing. And so I say this to say, one lens is being able to see this through the lens of the impact of systemic oppression from identity formation. Right? This is going to impact children very differently, and we have to understand that. You can understand it if you begin to see that children, we know adolescent development is just a natural process, right? It's challenging. But when you layer on race, class, and culture, that impacts children very differently. Children that live in trauma and that have secondary trauma and genetic trauma, there's a whole other body of research that is codifying that the impact of the impact of slavery is impacted our DNA and how we are dealing with these traumas in many different ways. I say this to say, you have to understand and be able to differentiate what we need to go through, the impacts of systemic oppression through the individual, through the interpersonal, this idea of the microaggressions, why when I'm watching, I'm sitting in a classroom, and for me, I've been a middle school teacher. If you're a middle school teacher, you know, kids are all over the place, the energy's cool, you don't get, but it was so interesting, new first year teacher, young white young man, all awesome. He was literally, he stood up in his chair and then he kind of sat down and he was squatting. And I wasn't tripping, he's comfortable, he wants to sit there cool. On the other opposite of the class, a young king did the same thing. And immediately, the teacher called him out, and then they got into this exchange. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Like, I mean, the stuff I talk about here, I'm seeing it in action. And the teacher went immediately to the young black man, and how she engaged him was very differently than how she engaged the white brother. And I say that to say, if you're not aware of that, this is how stuff that play, and I'm telling you, right, wrong, or different, it plays itself out every day in every class in every school across America. And we just got to be able to be aware of that. And that's why video is so important, right? I mean, one of the greatest tools when we're teaching is, let's go, I don't want to go deconstruct your lesson through talking in my notes. Let's go watch it. Because there's things then that, and even having children be able to give us that feedback, there's things that we're just not aware of that are very important if we want to disrupt some of these cycles. So I say that to say it's important to have our kind of oppressive, our lens of systemic oppression lens, and see these through the domains of it, the individual, the interpersonal, the institutional, and the structural. It's also important around the racial equity lens, and I just lifted that up as well. Listening, I want to talk about just real quickly the power of listening. I have found that, and like this style I would typically never do, I would rather be a guide on the side versus, the sage on the stage. Every now and then you need to be on the sage but we need to mix it up. But it is important in the spirit of constructive listening, that's where I was at. Man, I realized, and it didn't come until much later in my life, that when I'm listening to people, most of the times, I may be listening, but I'm already formulating my next thought, formulating my counter argument, getting ready to go, oh no, I'm gonna pivot and go over here, when in actuality, I need to shut my mind up and just be one with everything you're saying. And that takes practice, and that takes time. And then it takes some process to even then recognize, man, based on what you said, is it okay for me to share how I feel? And in education, I feel we need to slow down and do that much more often. Because we throw so much ACU-speak, and we're saying in acronyms, that we just lose people, and we don't really know their why. We don't know how to stay connected and connect that to the work. And so this idea within racial equity of really listening and using story, to me, is transformational. And so I appreciate all of you because you've been listening to me for a minute. Typically, again, best practices provide opportunities for people just to, to kind of listen and learn. But all the other aspects and community agreements are very important to understand, to move away from kind of this idea of, understanding systems of opportunity versus systems of oppression, having equitable outcomes. This is a framework that we use. This is the framework that we use within African American Male Achievement. Kind of talked about the conditions that treat the pond. So if Oakland was a pond, and why African American males are underperforming other students, what would contribute to the toxicity, school culture and conditions contribute to that, harsh discipline policies and harsh, like zero tolerance discipline. That stuff does not work. Actually, the data shows that it increases African American males being suspended and getting referrals. More restorative practices are better. The biased curriculum, why you wondering why many kings are not interested in class? Because most of the time, this stuff has no relevance to who they are, where they come from. So how can we take and evolve our curriculum to ensure that it's not biased? The negative framing of African American male students, the discrimination and criminalization from negative media portrayal. So we'll talk a little bit about the power of narrative change, but that's a real big one. When you turn on television and all you're seeing are these negative stereotypes. When you listen to corporate hip hop, all I'm seeing. When I get into school and all you're responding to is all this negative stuff, that has a huge impact on the efficacy of black children. All that stuff contributes to the toxicity of the schools, which means ends up leading to high dropout rates, low reading proficiency in the school to prison pipeline. So that's the toxicity. What we do to counter that is change policy. What we do to counter that is engage parents. What we do to challenge that or change that is narrative change, lifting the voices of our kings. These are some of the other things that we're doing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But this is just a schematic that kind of captures in one swoop kind of how we're approaching the work in Oakland from a system standpoint. And when we do all that, we can deliver on the promise of a quality education. These are some amazing kings. Brother Kevin's been a teacher in Oakland for the last 6 years. He graduated from Oakland McClymonds High School. He's my son's 8th grade manhood development teacher, but he just got accepted to Harvard grad school, and so we're all trying to raise $71,000 to get him there. But he's an extraordinary young man. These 3 young kings are artists that are actually creating products for us to sell, because that's the other piece. In public schools, we got to get creative and generate our own revenue. So these kings are actually creating dope logos and t-shirts that we're creating to support AMA. But I love that picture on many fronts. But when we get the system and structure right, we'll be able to deliver on the promise. So this next piece, changing the narrative about black boys from deficit to asset. So I want to show you, and then I want to have a little Q&A. This is something that we did a few months ago.
Together today to really acknowledge an extraordinary report put out by the Campaign for Black Male. It's an index that actually did a review of 50 cities across the country around what cities are doing to improve life and educational outcomes for African American children. And the city of Oakland was recognized as one of the top 5 cities.
I really just appreciate the national recognition that this program has received in Oakland as well as at Montera, because it's something that can be shared. It's something that we can do everywhere, and it's successful here and it can be successful there.
As principal at Montera, I mean, words cannot really express the impact that AMA has had on the campus. So as a principal, the biggest impact is just the overall effect it's having on the campus at large. It's been more than just the students in the class. It's been everyone.
This month is Black History Month, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for so many other freedom fighters, educators, and leaders that created the condition for in 2010 when we launched to create a place and space where we can be intentional and unapologetic around the needs of African American men. And why did we do that? It was because of the data. Districts across the country had created the conditions of pushing our kings out outside of school and feeding and fueling the school to prison pipeline. We've been able to reduce suspension rates across the system by 48%. Every year, we've been able to improve the core graduation rate for African American males in the city of Oakland.
We want to inspire them to do more than what everybody else says that they're going to be or what they're going to do.
I see all of the hard work, the dedication that you guys bring to this program, because I'm only one person, but there's 50 of you guys. Every time you go to class and you actually do well, you're making history for yourself, you're making history for the rest of the black boys that may come into this program, and for the rest of the facilitators that we hope will come to this program and will help our program grow.
You are the hope. Like each of you is the hope. Hope as men, hope as black men.
AMA is very important to me. It helped me so much through my life. I don't know where I'd be without it. I learned things from my brothers. They helped me, I helped them. They've been
How often do you all have press conferences featuring your kings in your school? It can be a rhetorical question. Something to think about, y'all. I mean, many times we're talking about, we're having press conferences for our African American male students and it's negative stuff. I really encourage us, we gotta lift up the kings that are doing well in everything, in art, doing well in bowling, doing well on ACT, SAT tests, doing well at home. If they move from 20% to 10%, I mean, ritualizing it's okay to do good, and I see you. A lot of times what I've learned, and I'm speaking for our context in Oakland, is we spend a lot of time just selling and sharing all the things that we're not doing. And so one of the big pieces that we try to do in Oakland is really just kind of this idea of change the narrative from the deficit to the asset. And not only does it help adults, it actually changes the worldview of our kings, because they really are only going to go as far as the people they see and the things that they hear. And so that's why I give thanks and I appreciate CBMA. And question, comment?
I wanted to recognize our board member for this district before she heads out, Ms. Diane Porter.
Being here tonight, I apologize. I have another event at the African American Heritage Center, so thank you. I've been to Oakland. I've seen it for myself. It's awesome. So you'll have to come back because we're going to be a little bit more awesome, just a little bit of competition.
That's all love.
You're always welcome to come back. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for coming out. Take care. And yeah, competition is all love in the spirit, you know, a healthy competition. That's all love. And I love Louisville. I wish I was staying downtown. though. Y'all got me by the airport, but it's okay. And man, the Muhammad Ali Center is a mecca. I mean, I'm honored that I've been taking kings there for the last 4 years, and we're really trying to use his many of his principles to inspire. So no, it's a great place. But the video is just another strategy that we use around narrative change. So I talked a little bit about the power of telling your story. We use story to share, sharing story to set the frame, right? So it's important too, as you go into your faculty meeting, or your department meeting, or your community meeting, it's good to lead with a story, right? Because story kind of crosses through kind of many domains, and you can use a good story to kind of prime the audience on where it is that you're trying to go. And it can cut through and make bonds in ways that sometimes, if you just go straight to the topic, people already have determined their opinion. And so we do that strategically within the city of Oakland, in particular talking around black boys. And yet, I'll say that, we do that. We are also a sanctuary city. And you know, the president called out our mayor for some of the things that she did, and that's okay. But we are a sanctuary city, and so we talk about that, we share that. But I say all that to say that using the power of story is very important. Sharing story to build relationships, talked about that. This one's and we do a little workshop on this one, and we have to be careful too, because it was interesting, because I saw this play itself out in one of the classrooms. Building language versus breaking language, right? So really making sure that we're using words that actually build people up versus the language of breaking people down. And within black culture, in particular African culture, you know, a lot of times our kings will be, you know, they'll be roasting each other. And I remember doing it, they call it playing the dozens. But one time we had to break it down, and it was an elder who had to tell all of us, you know where playing the dozens actually comes from? So back in the day, and this is during the period of slavery in this country, The last slaves to be sold were the slaves then that had limbs missing, few fingers. There was something that was wrong with them, and they would have all of them and say, they wouldn't just sell individual, this would be a group. And while they were waiting to be slaves in a completely demeaning scenario, they would say things about each other. And that saying things about each other, cracking jokes to deal with that stress of what was about to happen, just kind of continued to this idea of playing the dozens of always breaking you down. What you're not doing, and oh, you can't do that, do that. And it's crazy how these things become ritual and normalized. So we try to flip it, man, don't break me down, build me up. Don't talk about what I can't do, talk about what I can do. And I say that to say, even us as adults, when a child comes to you saying, I want to be an NBA player, cool, man. All right, this is what we got to do. Spirit, mind, and body. You got to get your academics right. You got to get your body right. You got to get your eating right. You got to get your relationship right. You got to get your finances right. We should not be saying, oh, you can't do it. You're only 5'4", or you can't. You can't. That is not our place. And so I say that to say, I heard it today too, and I'm aware of it with my own sons, where they say something, maybe extreme. How can I help support them and continue to build them up? But that's important, in particular around the framing of narrative change, just making sure that we're using empowering language, affirming language, and building language. It could be framed as SEL, it could be framed as other ways, but just wanted to lift that up. Do you communicate about the problem, or do you communicate about the promise? So I'm curious to know, and again, this is rhetorical, but in the sense of, do you all know the collective genius? What's all the amazing things that have happened in the city of Oakland? Man, I got this one king today, they had to leave the session because he was going on a sign-in. All the kings were going to go with him because he was signing to go to the school that he was about to. Man, and everybody gave him a standing ovation. There should be a press conference there, right? We should know all the students that are getting ready to sign and go away to schools, or kings that are in college working stuff out. But just ritualizing and communicating the promise versus the problem. And I think we a lot of time fall into the problem. So just being aware of that. We took communication so deep in our department, our district didn't even have a strategic communication plan. We created a strategic communication plan. So I actually contracted out someone to really help us. And I just say this to say, we had a tiny little budget. We were a small team. When I first started, first it was me the first year, then the next year was a staff of 4. But we value communication so much so that we created a communication plan. And we would practice. We would go through our FAQ, our frequently asked question sheet. We would go through all the things from director to teacher to student to parent, and we would just practice and practice. And then we got it, and we'd go teach other people. Imagine if we really wanted to address moving from the breaking language to the building language and how we talked about black children, if we started practicing the affirming language versus the negative language. It would go far. But all that to say, as a result of our department creating a strategic communication plan, we were able to create a strategic communication plan. So we moved from crisis communication, which districts do very well, to aspiration communication, or at least finding a balance. This idea of don't let it tell I vision, tell your vision. One of the most toxic vehicles for negative information dissemination is tell I vision. So that's why we're really big on telling our story, but also making sure that we're deconstructing some of the things that our kings are seeing, and being able to be aware of and share other stories, be it in video. No one will tell your story like you do. The blessing about this day and age now is this little thing. You could create a full-length feature, Snapchat. How often do we allow technology for kings to share what they're learning as a form of exhibition, to kind of tell their own story as a check-in, to interview their parents and their grandparents? But this is an amazing tool in terms of the technology of telling story and sharing that from a positive prime versus a negative prime. So we do a lot of storytelling just through our phones and what have you as well. AMA communications plan out of the gate. Oh, so I said that we had a communication plan out of the date. This is a quote that really resonates with me. Until the story of the hunt is told by the lion, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So it's important in the spirit of equity and disrupting inequity, we gotta get other stories out there. We have to, because right now there is a dominant narrative more times than not, in particular, the structure and the formalization of public school education that doesn't lift up the cultural prosperity of other children. And all children benefit understanding that. And it can't be locked into just that one book or just that one time of the year. This is the importance of us rewriting curriculum from preschool through high school. We do our own newsletter, the Student Leadership Council. That's another way of they edit it, they write the stories, they interview folk. But this is another way to support literacy, actually to let Kings know what's happening. Kings know what's happening. But another way that we just try to get the news, the print media, we're evolving it to a web-based platform too. But another way to get stories of Kings out to other, like even today, and that might be an idea, the Kings that y'all are working with, for them to have their own little, it could be a splash page or just have a little one page of their stories. The King that went to the sign-in, the sign-in spot. That's just another way to build community and get to know each other as well. The Kingmakers web, so if you're interested as well to kind of really learn my story and the story of what we've been doing in Oakland, Kingmakers of Oakland is a website, it's free. There's 5 mini documentary series, it's great for professional development. Not that we figured it out, just that you could show a little 8-minute clip, 12-minute clip, and then do some turn and talk about, well, what are the stories here? Who is the Chris Chatmon in this city? What is transformational leadership? What is transformational teaching? All that is free, and there's curriculum on the website as well. In terms of time, so I'm going to go through it. If I have a chance to show one more video, I'm going to show you Romero's video, which is one of the Kings that have come with us. That video will soon be up on the website. But another way that we use this, and we actually, one of the most incredible journeys in my life is, we have our home theater in Oakland called, what's the home theater? The Lake Mary Theater. What's the theater? Now I'm forgetting my own theater. Anyway, it's this old school theater. Shows how a little tired I am. But we keep on the, what do they call it? The key mark, when they, the marquee, there we go. It was, man, so powerful to see Kingmakers of Oakland video. So that was a big community meeting. It sold out, and that was a great way. We showed the video and its length, the full features, about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we had a community dialogue. So you can also use film as a way to engage community, because film is another way that kind of hits you in the heart, hits you in the mind, and gets people talking. That's another strategy that we do. So we use the films as another way to have parent and community engagement. The other piece that's really important, and this was kind of a little bit scattered and not as strategic, but now it's very strategic. So 2 years before John was at the Education Week, I was acknowledged at Education Week as a leader to learn from, which is great on multiple levels. And I say this to say, you want to invite researchers in to kind of codify your practices. And you want to invite your local newspapers, you want to invite national media, you want to get your folks, your college students to write papers on your work. The more people talking about your work, the more people that are going to get interested and shine a light on what you're doing. And you got to be fully transparent. But I say this as I have 2 other culture keepers that have blessed me with your presence in this space. We couldn't have done what we've done, the African American Male Achievement, if it wasn't for Sean Dove and Campaign for Black Male Achievement. There was professional development and learning for myself, but also the stories and the work that we're doing became part of a whole broader national story as well. And that actually what got me to Louisville, Kentucky, where I got to deepen my learning and rock this little hat. But we've now been published in The View, so the Annenberg Institute, New York University has produced, they have an educational periodical. So this is really for my research data heads who don't get moved unless it's in an education periodical. Well, our stuff has been codified in the Harvard Review and in the Annenberg Institute, which is basically Brown, and they've written on our work in two separate editions, and then invited me to write. And I typically, I like to talk, I don't necessarily like to write as much. So I just got with a researcher, a doctor, 2 different folk, one from Brown, and then most recently, the Director of Equity for University of California, Davis, and they wrote on our work. So this edition right here is the April edition for The View. And this one's actually pretty interesting. Why? Because all 8 sections in this book are written from school districts in the United States that have had the audacity to go all in around African American male achievement, or African American male achievement, or African American achievement, and or Latino student achievement. And so it's a great, if you're interested around kind of systems work, it's a great opportunity to kind of learn what New York's doing, what Milwaukee's doing, what Oakland is doing, and some other cities. And so we got to write in that. Probably we went from kind of small fish to big fish went on Super Bowl Sunday 3 years ago. New York Times does a focus on education once a year. It's a pullout. Well, one year they focused on AAMA, and it was huge. I mean, the phone ain't stopped ringing since then. And I just say this again, not that we figured it out, but it just spoke to a lot of people in this country really are trying to learn and figure out what do we need to do. When we were in the New York Times, that's when, I won't say my life changed, but it kind of changed for Oakland in many different ways, because we just had waves of folk. What are y'all doing? What are you doing? And, you know, there was good and there was bad as well. But we invited all of that folks to come in. Why? When we talked about this, the overall frame for this topic, changing the narrative, well, that was wind beneath our wings to lean into. Well, what does Brother Chris say? You know, what is Oakland doing? Man, king, why do you call your students kings? Let me tell you why. So that was all part of it was kind of an organic strategy, but in hindsight, man, it was one of the most brilliant moves that we could have done. And so these are all live links. And if you want, I mean, I could send, if you guys are interested, I could send the slide deck and everything that I had. You can click on and it's live stuff. But all of these are live feeds from the Promise of Place report that just got released, but we're in both of those. The Black Minds Matter, the Educational Trust. It's an equity research organization that does these massive equity reports. They focused on our work 1 year. Essence Magazine did 4 covers on black male achievement across the country, and they lifted up our work. What I don't have here was hilarious. Locally, you know, in our community, in the black neighborhood, if you've made it to Jet Magazine, you know that's on. Well, we had a little picture about that big 1 year when we made it in Jet Magazine, and it was just lifting up. This was like year 2, year 3. And we used to do these community engagements around the African-American students that scored perfect on the state standardized test. And they put a little picture of one of our community celebrations, but it was dope just to know, you know, we made it to Jet Magazine. But I talk about this because this was important. When we first launched our work, this was the Essence piece. I got to pick the pictures. Brother Coy Hill, principal of Park Elementary School. So they did a nice write-up of one of the top 10 things people were talking about. But all of this was huge as well, because in the Bay Area, the local media, how they talked about black males was disheartening. And I met with Jill Tucker, I met with all of the educational writers, and they wouldn't change their mind. One of the things that was most powerful, we were at a Starbucks of all places one time, and I said, Jill, man, we gotta talk. Her children go to Oakland Public Schools as my children go to Oakland Public Schools. But I was like, sister, I need you to understand, like when you put these negative images, and I'll show you the next slide, that has a visceral effect in my community. I said, man, I need you to round this stuff out. And you know what she shared with me, which was humbling, and I appreciated her truth, but it told me I had more work to do. She said, I don't write for your audience. I write for other middle-class white women. That is my audience. The largest paper in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, I don't know if folks are familiar. I mean, it's a huge, massive area, and she didn't understand the power. When she put something to print, people took that to heart. So I stayed on her. Why? It's relationship. It's story. And I was like, at some point, our hearts are going to connect in a right way, and you're going to understand where I'm coming from. What also helped is having all these other articles kind of agitate and just empower her with language. So I'm going to show you an example of how this has evolved in local print media. So the shift from 2012 to 2015. So back in from 2010 to 2012, man, this one was up for a Pulitzer. Believe it or not, this series, they did a four-week front cover series on our work. Took 5,000 pictures. Awesome pictures. And the one picture they had on the front page was the king. This ain't even in the classroom. This is through the door of the one king who had his head on the door, or had his head on the desk. Didn't tell you why his head was on the desk. That's a whole other story. Because I've since talked to the instructor about that, the day he had. All that to say, what does it say? Who can read the top? Can someone read the top for me?
Black boys see bleak future in school.
Yeah. And then we go, and then you see the picture. That's how they're talking about. That's the segue to our work. Then go to the next headline. Someone read that for me.
Detailed reports highlight challenges facing black boys in Oakland schools.
Right. So every time they would even talk about my work, and even I was trying to we're doing Man Up Conference, doing all this amazing stuff. I called a matriarch on TV, newscast, a sister, and I was like, man, Pam, what can I do to get something? You guys got to cover something. She said, Chris, the media ain't gonna cover anything that you're doing unless something bad is happening. And she said, this is not my feeling, but you need to know this is where we go to. So sure enough, she said, but I'm gonna get somebody to your Man Up conference. So crazy, right? So they come up to her, it was like we're in our 18th Man Up conference now, it was maybe our 4th or 5th. So they come out, beautiful, I'm like, oh, wow, they're the whole day. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what we want. They're gonna show the whole day in the interviews and the intergenerational relationship. Sure enough, 10 o'clock news. 2 people killed, woo, woo, woo. They're going in, I'm like, man, I thought we were gonna be on shot. So it was like, not 3 minutes, probably that was long, 2 minutes. The last probably 20 seconds of the caption of, shootings, killings, and at Frick Middle School, Man Up conference, and it was like, boop, 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 couple pictures, and then they faded into the rest of the news. And so that was early on. But if you stay the course, again, really the work we're doing, the other piece in my heart is this is legacy work. I've come to accept in my life, I'm not gonna see where, I'm not gonna get us to the promised land, right? This is an MLK piece. But really I take what I've learned from the monarch butterfly. Monarch butterflies, to reach their final destination in their circle of life, is 7 life cycles. So they come out of their cacophony, or whatever my science, the cocoon, thank you. Then they fly, right? Or whatever the process is, I don't even know the process, but they live, die, they give a little caterpillar, they live, die, but they go through that 7 times to get to their final destination. And I've really accepted the work of equity in terms of dismantling systems of oppression, institutional racism, that the next journey is really about, for every one Chris, I need 25 kings. You know what I'm saying? For every Jahi, my program manager, I need 50 Jahis. So us thinking, who are you coaching, learning to go farther, faster than you? And so I say that to say, in this piece, in 3 years, we went from the negative to then 2015, Oakland aims to lift students who are young, male, and black. And who are they featuring? Kevin, who graduated from McClymonds High School, is now going to where? Harvard, after teaching for 6 years with us. Every black male student in Oakland can be a what? That was a game changer. Can be a king. They're now starting to use our language and accept our language. And I tell you, one of the blessings, and we didn't get the metaphor of king. I want to recognize Fluker and some brothers that were doing amazing work in the 80s and 90s in Southern California, that the concept of referring to kings and queens. We got one of my brothers, Jerome, actually brought that to my team, but he was trained through their kind of pedagogy or their kind of framework. But I say that to say that was a game changer. For the most part now, the local media loves us. When they want a feel-good story, they call Brother Chris. And that is huge. It took hella confidence, hella patience, hella time, hella learning, humility, but you gotta have a strategy around narrative change. So that was the next section. This one, and in terms of time, because I want to dialogue, and I know I've been talking a lot, the importance and necessity of infusing and embedding African-centered, academically rigorous coursework with culturally responsive SEL. So one of the things I was gleaning from just quick check-ins, it sounds like SEL work in terms of Louisville public schools, you're not a big SEL district.
What is SEL for those of us?
And I appreciate that, yeah. Basically, it's social emotional learning. Another way, it's character development. It's just paying attention to values, right? And really, it's kind of good, it's just good teaching. We know sometimes in academia, we spend ridiculous amounts of time around just scope and sequence and the content and the curriculum in such a way that we underestimate the power of just a simple relationship. How are you? That hey, these are the 6 values of our school, and every day this is how we practice that. And what I've learned, the schools that actually accelerate learning for all have mastered social emotional learning, meaning they, on the front end, they've created the conditions and the culture, and this is regardless of race and gender, where there's mutual respect, there's love, there's an agreement where you're hurting, I'm hurting. That if there's a problem and I figured it out, that I ain't figured it out until you figured it out, so we're supporting each other. That to me, then you can use scope and sequence and differentiated instruction and all of the things that we grow so familiar with in academia. But SEL, which I appreciate, though, and my caution, and this is my tension in the conference, so is it validates kind of a Eurocentric paradigm in the sense of an individualistic value and values that can be universal, but allow me to talk about it in the context of a black experience, right? And that should be okay. If we're both one SEL, then we know there's not a one-size-fits-all for social emotional learning or values. We could have how you may say respect, I may say it a little bit differently. And so I say that to say, and I went deeper because I presented this in Chicago at the SEL conference. For y'all, I'm gonna glance over it, but I just say this to say we all should be on some level, if we want to accelerate academic performance, we do that at the speed of the relationship, the way we're in right relationship with our children. And even faster if we're in better relationship with the community that they're a part of. And I know that that is difficult and that's a challenge, but it should be part of the beautiful struggle. And I don't want to underestimate the power of the social emotional learning. But that, so this slide is powerful on multiple fronts. So this is King Robert. We actually asked him to put his head down. He runs track, awesome young brother. That's one of the dashikis that we just got from Nigeria. But one of the early data sets that we do at the first week of every school is we ask kings this question. Describe being a young black male in America. Y'all with me? So it's the first week of school. So this is just, and again, not super heavy data, but when you see the comparison data and why it's important for programs like what Brother John is doing and what my brother in the back is doing, this just speaks to the efficacy. So when you see the little word, we'll all say it together. Y'all with me? A little call and response. All right, so this is the first week of school, how kings were describing themselves in America. Scared, come on, everybody.
Hiding, survival, understated, underappreciated, alone, dangerous, humbling, targeted, hard, needs to be a hard worker, very stereotyped, feared, not respected, underestimated, statistic, ignorant, horrible, bad, sad, hard, poverty, poor, hard, unfair, scary, hard, stereotypical, hard, discrimination, dangerous.
All right, you get it, I'm just gonna go to the end. So these are the words that they use to describe themselves, and then when they leave, either at the end of the semester or at the end of the year, we ask them a very similar set of questions. How kings describe themselves at the end of the semester. I am a diamond in the rough. I am a miracle in disguise. I am the essence of time. I am unstoppable. I am the victorious one. I am the blood that pumps your main artery. I am the breath of fresh air. I am the bullet in the chamber. I am the chosen one. I am the American dream. I am young, gifted, and black. And so just in the spirit of how our kings identify from the beginning to the end, in the beginning, prior to the class, and at the end of the class is very important in terms of some of the things that we're trying to, how we're engaging, encouraging, and empowering them. And so, I mean, that's huge because when you feel that way, now you have a whole different approach towards school and towards learning and towards self. These are some of the classes. I know this is very hard to see, but in the back, and hopefully everyone got the information, I actually have the course description list. Is that still, maybe if you guys could just kind of take that out, just to take a look at. And I'm in the home stretch. And this is important again. I think one of the institutional wins for this department was actually getting approved, accredited, and embedded 7 African-centered courses that all children can take. All right? So 3 language arts classes. So now in our high schools, if they don't want to necessarily take or to complement their European literature course, they can also take revolutionary literature course. In their history course, to complement their U.S. history course, they can take African American men and women in U.S. history. It not only fulfills the high school graduation requirement, when they go to apply to colleges, it satisfies that English language arts or history or art or elective course. Institutionally, that's huge, right? And anybody can teach the course. Right now, the proof point was we wanted to recruit black men. Why? Because when we did our listening campaign, when we first started, black boys were saying we didn't have access to black teachers. We increased African American male teachers in our district by 25%, but these courses can be taught by anybody and everybody. Institutionally, that's big. The content is all aligned with Common Core. That's kind of the framework for the country, aligned with ESSA and other things, but just wanted to share that with you. Yes, ma'am.
Are these courses elective or are any of them required?
Great. They're all elective courses. They're all elective. They're not required. Yeah, that's the next one. That's the next pivot. But that's a great question, and I love your forward thinking. Some of the books, I wasn't exposed to any of these books until I was at my first year community college. Now, Kings, as early as 3rd grade, are exposed to Carter G. Woodson, Ivan Van Sertima, Ralph Ellison, Frederick Douglass, and we're deconstructing this to help our Kings, one, read academically rigorous content, to engage in academic discourse. And actually, even one of the brothers today, one of the classes, we talked about, listen, talk exactly how you want to talk, but there's time and place. When you with the homies and you kicking it, man, y'all can kick it, talk. When I'm with my crew, you think I'm talking just like this too? No. I said, but there's a time and place. So in school, it's our role to help you how to master that academic language. Why? Because that's the rules of the game in school. It doesn't make you a lesser person. When you go to grandma's house, there's a certain way you got to conduct yourself. Hat comes off, shoes come off, you greet everybody. School has those same sort of routines and rituals, and as opposed to fighting them or us agitating them, we just need to embrace each other, right? If you elevate my mind, I will elevate my pants. But we stay focused on, why are you sagging? No, you got it all wrong. Get to the heart. Get to know who they are. And I'm telling you, the transition, the pants will come up, everything that you want. But if you go right to that, it will be a reflex. They take it as a punch, they're gonna punch you right back. Cool, but the books are extraordinary, and it's integrated in all of our classes as well. Recruitment and retention strategies. These are the Kings. This was a September picture. I want to start with 95-year-old Oscar Wright. So when it's all said and done, the two groups of people that really hold me, my wife holds me accountable. The two, outside of my wife, the folks who will always hold me accountable are my King, Student Leadership Council, and Brother Wright. So whoever I'm meeting with, whenever he shows up in my office, he just walks on in. And I don't care who I'm with, I try to tighten that up, and Brother Wright, because he's 95, But this cat didn't miss a school board meeting for 3 decades. He sued Oakland Unified School District at the first failed attempt around when we were involved in an agreement to resolve, which is known as a voluntary resolution plan, because we were disproportionately suspending black boys and referring them to special ed. We have been doing that since the 1980s. Oakland ain't alone. The reason why the district got sued was that man, okay? And he initiated that with his own money and organized folk. Fast forward to 2013, all right? What we were involved in again with the United States Department of Ed Civil Rights Act. We were in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act for doing what? Suspending black boys for what? Referring to special ed, in particular with emotional disturbances. This time, though, it wasn't just him. It was very different this time. It was our superintendent, Tony Smith, and this was a great, you buy me a beer conversation. I'll really let you know how all this played itself out. But Russell Ali, who was under Arnie Duncan, worked a deal with our city, which was interesting. We were invited into an agreement to resolve, to showcase our work. And this is another story. This will be a part of the book, which hopefully you all purchase. The untold story, the first 3 years of my life is that people thought I was a district employee. I was actually an executive on loan. Because by law, I could not have a race-specific position and be an employee of the district. It wasn't until the United States Department of Education found us out of compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, I was able to go from being an outside entity into the district. That was really not a whole lot of, in district, everyone thought I was a district employee, but these were some of the incredible political and strategic moves. I don't know why I went over there, but I just want to acknowledge Oscar Wright for just being, we're going to be recognizing him next Monday at our 18th annual African American Honor Roll celebration. But these are just brothers that are teaching and directors and other folks in the movement. A few things. Interview, this is really important. We hire for attitude, we train for skill, right? The big thing about that, I can't teach you how to love a black child. Either you love a black child and see their brilliance and their beauty, or that comes across the interview and we're like, okay, we keep it moving. But if that unconditional love, that agape love for black children comes across in the interview, I can train you how to teach. I can train you scope and sequence. I can train you differentiated instruction. I can train you all the alternative ways to evaluate and assess. But I don't have time to teach you that those young kings that are going to be looking at you that I don't have to, either you see their innate greatness or you don't. These are just a couple of things that we do to screen. If they have background in youth development experience, familiarity with our mission, and vision is very important. And I said hire for attitude, train for skill. 73% of our brothers have been, 73% of manhood development facilitators have up to 5 years of teaching experience. 86% of them have 7 years of youth development experience, and 92% of our teachers strongly agree that AMA created a culture with an emphasis on brotherhood. Just some data. Talked a little bit about our retention rates. So this has implications across the system, and now that I'm the Deputy Chief of Equity, my role permeates the entire system. I could actually acknowledge, if you want to stop, right now the retention rate for 1st to 3-year teachers is pretty low. And part of it is just we don't pay teachers enough. But these affinity groups, with the brothers, keep providing an opportunity twice a month for brothers to come together, to heal, to share best practice, to learn, to love, to be who we are. That more than anything got us to 92% retention rate, as told by those brothers. Public school systems, we want to PD our way, and it becomes very transactional. And we have to find the balance of transactional versus, or I shouldn't say verse, transactional and transformational. Really, people want to be a part of a group where they feel validated, they feel seen and heard, wherever they are at in their teaching continuum, knowing that we're all on that journey, right? Public school education, a lot of times we catch you, or you got to do this. And we got it wrong on that area. Parent engagement, this is the Man Up Pledge. This is King Che, amazing young brother. We close our classes with this I Stay Woke. I hope, I didn't, you know what? Did you guys get these? Oh, good. Yeah. Man, these are dope. Brother Bayan Bakari, he's writes our curriculum. He wrote this. We recite this at the end of classes. We recite this at the end of Man Up conferences. So I'll just give you a quick minute just to maybe read it to yourself, check it out, and then we'll close it up, and then we can have 30 minutes of conversation, if that's cool. So I'll close with this Cornel West quote. The quote, more than Cornel West reverberates with me, although I appreciate my brother. This quote I really appreciate though. There's never any guarantee of victory in history. Nevertheless, if we can commit to loving, serving, and understanding each other, recognizing that we are far more alike than we are different, we have a chance. Cornel West. I encourage y'all, man, take it forward. I'll be here for about 30 more minutes. We can chop it up, talk, question. I'll leave my contact information if there's ways that I can support. I'm down. But outside of that, that's my presentation, and hope you all got something out of it. And I got 3 little gift bags, so I don't know how to distribute that. But if there's, if you have a young king, maybe that you really want to give a bag to, the cool little bags. I'll leave it up to you when we're done, just to maybe grab a bag for your king. How about that? Otherwise, we can cut on the lights and we can chop it up.